Moving directly into the top 5 entries in my top 15 favorite Steven Universe episodes. Number 5 is Now We're Only Falling Apart, which may seem like an odd choice to you guys because I have gone on the record saying that I really don't like the Rose's pink diamond reveal. But this fantastic episode, which was framed very much like The Answer, an episode which I've also praised for its framing device, lent a lot of context to that reveal, and made me feel a lot better about it and start to see the sorts of narrative potentials that it actually had. This is an episode rife with emotion, which allows the characters to interact in ways that we don't usually see them interacting, and it set up what I think turned out to be a pretty cool arc of the show, or arcs rather, I guess, technically, the Garnet wedding arc, and then the Era 3 arc, which, while both of them were short, one of which is shorter than it should have been, hint hint, the Era 3 arc, they're solid. I like them. There's a lot of good episodes in them. And I mean, getting to see Sapphire is always a treat. Getting to see Pink Diamond actually doing stuff was really cool. I don't know, this filled in so many gaps in the lore after so long. Even if I don't like all of those details which filled those gaps, as someone who likes the lore of this show, who likes to follow and understand, almost hoard the lore of this show, of course I'm going to like this one. Of course I'm going to like this one. And this one advanced the show and twisted and turned it so many times over. It fits every criteria for making this list and then some. Which brings us into number 4, which is where we start getting into compound episodes. Like, I don't know if this one's technically considered a compound episode, but I consider it one. That's Off Colors and Lars's Head. This one speaks for itself, I think. We find about other unconventional gems on Homeworld. We find out how they live. They're rescued by Steven and Lars. This is like the Lars episode. I mentioned Lars and the Cool Kids makes the list because it's the episode where Lars became a bearable character. And like the show from the very beginning was setting him up super hard as an important character, even though he was really insufferable. This is the episode where that pays off. So if Lars and the Cool Kids made it on this list, of course this one was going to make it here too, or these two were going to make it here too. I am, of course, counting both of them as one, right? Like, if we're talking about advancing character and turning points for characters and for the show, introducing the Off Colors and turning Lars into a hero who would risk his life to protect them, and then turning Lars into effectively a second Lion, like, that's such a big change. That's such a big advancement for the character. Everything that we had learned about Lars, everything Lars has been going through up to that point, it all culminates here, and Lars becomes the heroic person that he always could have been, that he always had the potential to be. And while I wish the Off Colors had been used more later on, they still leave a pretty big impact on the show. And they're all very interesting characters whose mere existence, the mere existence of these characters, expands the lore just by them existing. Like not many characters in fiction can boast that of themselves, but the Off Colors can, and I desperately wish we'd learned more about them. I still wish we had seen Fluorite unfuse at some point. I still wish we had learned the backstory of Rhodonite. But, I mean, I've had so much fun speculating about them anyway. At this point, with the show over and my being satisfied with the way it ended, I don't even really care anymore. I'm perfectly fine with headcanoning the backstories of these characters myself, because they are just that interesting that it ends up being just that fun. Not to mention that these were the first episodes where we got a good look at Homeworld, which was such a new thing at the time. I don't know, I just have really good memories of watching this pair of episodes. And this is still my list. I still get to choose, at the end of the day, what makes it onto it. Which brings us to another compound episode, this time jumping back to Season 1 episodes again. And as I'm sure some of you guys have already guessed, It's still too early for the return and jailbreak, so of course I'm talking about Mirror Gem and Ocean Gem, the introduction of Lapis Lazuli, and I know so many people were disappointed by Lapis later, but I always liked Lapis. I always thought she was a cool character, and what an introduction to her this pair of episodes was. She is by far the most powerful enemy these characters ever fought, up to and possibly even including the diamonds. Like, when Lapis's gem gets fixed, it really feels like she takes a few level downs in power, right? It definitely feels like she gets less impressive. Like, girl was able to lift the entire ocean into the sky. That's absolutely nuts. That's a level of power that I would argue we never actually see in the show again. The diamonds are definitely really cool and really durable and really strong. Like, they can do a lot of stuff that even Lapis can't. But we never see them output enough energy to move the entire ocean out of the ocean. It's absolutely nuts. It makes for such a cool visual, and the water clones of the crystal gems make for such a cool and dynamic fight. The direct involvement of Connie and Greg was great. It's the first time that they truly become crystal gems, along with Steven and the gems. It's the episode in which it's confirmed that the corrupted gems are corrupted gems, that they used to be like real humanoid gems, like the core 3 gem characters. There's some spoopiness to it when we're not sure what's up with the mirror. Steven really takes charge for like the first time for real in this episode, and there's that hint of Homeworld at the end. Like Pearl and Garnet know that something will be coming now. That little tease at the end was so good. Like, for that point in the series, this was the show announcing that it was going to be a lore show with big, bombastic, space opera style storytelling. It opened up the show to possibilities that had barely even been hinted at before. Like, even though this is technically the halfway point of the extremely long season 1, this can technically be considered the show's first season finale. Like, if they were splitting up episodes into the same size chunks that they did later, this should have been the end of the first season. And which episode was after this? Houseguest? It would have been Houseguest, because Greg broke his leg in Ocean Gem. Houseguest should have been the first episode of season 2. And this episode definitely has that end of season kind of energy to it. It's fun all around, it's impressive all around, and I have such good memories of all of the cool reveals in it. So of course it's going to be on here, and it's going to hold a high spot. Which of course brings us to number 2, and I'm sure you guys are going to be curious as to which episode could be above Mirror Gem and Ocean Gem, aside from, of course, the return and jailbreak, which we all know is going to be number 1. Let's not kid ourselves here. But I actually put Mindful Education here, mostly for the song. I just really love the song in this episode. I actually don't have much more to say about it. Like, it's a good episode in general. It's a fantastic episode for Steven's characterization, which surprisingly we don't get a lot of. Like, Steven's characterization mostly happens through his interactions with other people, but this episode felt like it focused directly on advancing his character and his needs and his, let's say, traumas, because that really is the best word for it. Addressing his traumas and advancing him by doing so. It featured Connie, it featured Stevani, which of course bumps it up a couple of points. It featured a song from Garnet, which bumps it up a couple more. I'm just very fond of this one all around. It advanced the story, not to the same degree as some of the other episodes on this list, but in different ways that we hadn't really seen before. And some of the animation in this one is just absolutely spectacular. It's a fantastic looking episode. It has some really heavy, really impactful themes. a great song, and it features some of my favorite characters in the entire franchise. Of course, I love it a lot. For honorable mentions, before we get into number 1, I want to mention The Future, the final episode of Steven Universe Future, and unfortunately the only Steven Universe Future episode that I feel like could have possibly made this list, entirely on the basis of the fact that it was the episode which gave us all of that catharsis stemming from the reveal that Steven was dealing with his past traumas and moving on from them, which Future as a series was just frustrating enough that if we hadn't gotten that ending, I might have considered the entire show a bust. Not the entire Steven Universe expanded series overall, but just Future itself. If we hadn't gotten that sense of catharsis from the Future, I might have considered Steven Universe Future in its entirety to be a bust. But thankfully we did. This episode brought the entire series back around, put a big nice bow on it, and I end up liking it a lot entirely on those merits, but I still feel like it's weaker just fundamentally than practically every episode. Well, every good episode. Like even mildly good episode of the original series. Like, I said it in the part 1 of this video, I don't dislike Future. I think it rounds out to be a good show. But it was so depressing so much of the time. It was so frustrating so much of the time. It didn't really have any lore arcs. So many things were left dangling and not followed up on. While it's still a show that I enjoyed watching, I do feel like it's inferior to everything that came before it. And I do feel like, for the aforementioned reasons, this is the best episode of it. Next, we have Change Your Mind. Not because it's an amazing episode or anything, but just because it wraps up so much stuff and shows off so many things that so many fans have been wanting to see for so long. Diamonds fighting diamonds, White Diamond being a genuine threat, Steven's other fusions with the gems, the backup crystal gems actually getting in on a fight, coming to the rescue, being an effective force in the show, without the other core crystal gems having to be directly involved in their efforts. Like, things advance very quickly here, more quickly than they logically should have, but I still feel that they managed to advance those themes and those storylines in a believable kind of way, in a kind of way that if I squint just a little bit, I can buy that it happened as quickly as it did. And there was just so much eye candy here, up to and including the first ever appearance of Obsidian, a gem which technically appeared in the very first pilot episode, if you really think about it, if you really want to stretch your definition of appeared and you really think about it, but who we had never technically seen in spite of that. This one is on here strictly for rule of cool, but that's why it's only an honorable mention and not a numbered entry on this list. It's a fun episode, but at the same time, the fact that it had to be so rushed, and there is a reason why it's so rushed, I plan to talk about that at some point, it loses a lot of ground for me. I don't consider it among the show's best, but I will admit I do go back and rewatch this one pretty often. Finally, the last honorable mention is Steven Universe the movie, which, despite its logistic problems, which I have talked about in length, that being, how did Spinell learn how to fight? Where did she get her injector and her weapon? How did she get them, form a plan, and then get to Earth in the, half a day since Steven sent out the message that angered her in the first place? But I can put all those things aside and enjoy this movie for what it is. A really cool movie with some really great visuals and some fantastic action sequences and some even better musical numbers. It's just so much fun to watch as a fan of the Steven Universe phenomenon as a whole. There's a lot of stuff that happens in this movie because movie, but I can live with that. It's fine. But it's partially because of those things, and partially because it's not technically an episode of the show, and this is the top 15 episodes, that it doesn't make this list. It's just an honorable mention. Which brings us to, of course, the episode that you guys knew I was going to put at number 1, even before you clicked on the link to the first part of this video, and that is the compound episode, The Return and Jailbreak. The proper finale to what ended up being the first season of Steven Universe, and an episode that I have gushed about so much elsewhere that I don't even feel like I need to explain why I put it here. There were 2 things that really got me invested in this show. That being my initial theory that gems were built for a specific purpose by their homeworld, and the theory that Garnet was a fusion. Something that I figured out with very little evidence prior to this reveal. Like, straight up, the order of events was, one of my friends insisted that I start watching this show. I started to theorize about it, and then one of my theories was confirmed in one of the first episodes that I actually sat down when the episode first aired to watch. That being the reveal of Garnet being a fusion in Jailbreak. I would not have gotten so hooked on this show if those things hadn't happened the way they did. I, in many ways, credit this episode, these 2 episodes, rather, for my being a Steven Universe fan. Not to mention that we got so many straight-up lore reveals in this episode, and then, like, on top of them, even more, like, lore teases and tidbits, and also the fantastic Ruby Sapphire love song. Like, Stronger Than You is still a contestant for my favorite song in the entire series. Like, if I really thought about it, I think this would still be my favorite song in the entire series. And also, this is one where he found out that Garnet was made of love. That her 2 components were in a romantic relationship with each other. Which was the first, like, out-and-out instance of genuine LGBT plus representation in this show. The first real out-and-out example of that, which paved the way for all of the rest of it that we got, including the Garnet wedding, which is such a big deal. A lesbian wedding in a kid's cartoon is such a big deal for representation, and we wouldn't have gotten it if they hadn't managed to work this particular reveal into this particular episode of the show. It is a landmark for the series, and for a lot of people who weren't really super interested in, like, the towny stuff, or even, like, the overarching plot of the show, the high from this episode carried them through the fandom for quite a long time. There are a lot of people who loved this show for a very long time, for the majority of its existence, entirely because they adored this episode so much. And I entirely don't blame them. This episode is great. These episodes are great. This is also where we're first introduced to everybody's favorite beefcake, Jasper, as well as where we properly meet Peridot. And these are 2 characters who, regardless of how you feel about their stint as main villains on the show, were both technically main villains on the show for a while. So if we're talking about turning points for the show, these episodes would be a turning point for the show simply on the merit of those 2 things, on the fact that those 2 characters become arc villains. But, like, there's so many other twists and turns here. It's not even really possible to list them all in this short form summation style that I'm doing for this video. Like, there are episodes of the show that I go back and rewatch more often than this one, songs that I go back and listen to more often than Stronger Than You, but only because I've gone back and rewatched this episode and re-listened to that song so many times already. I won't say that the show was all downhill from here, because I definitely think there were highs and lows throughout the rest of the series. But this, I think, was really Steven Universe's peak. But that brings us to the end of this list. Guys, what did you think of it? Do you agree with my choices? Would you choose different episodes? If so, please let me know. Put your own list in the comment section down below. And just as in my... Thank you, Rupert. Just as in part 1, links to my full reviews of each of the episodes featured in this video will be in the description of this video if you want to check them out and refresh yourselves on my complete opinions of these episodes. My opinions of some of them may have actually grown and changed. I don't even really know, because I don't remember what specifically is in those reviews. So it might be fun to go back and rewatch them. And also, it would give me more views on those videos, so please do it. In the meantime, though, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.